My name is Rachel Wilson, and at 32, I never imagined I'd be waving at my parents from the window of my brand new colonial home directly across from theirs. 5 years ago, they gave me an ultimatum. Give up my childhood bedroom to my pregnant sister Heather or leave. I chose to leave, with nothing but my degree and a suitcase. Today, I watched their jaws drop when the moving truck pulled up to my new house, the one with the perfect view of their front porch. Revenge wasn't my plan, but karma has a funny way of coming full circle. Before I dive into what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching this from. Drop your city in the comments below. If you've ever dealt with family drama that changed your life, hit that like button. And if you want to see more stories about standing your ground and coming out stronger, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get into how I went from being kicked out to living my best life right where they can see it. I grew up in a comfortable, middle-class neighborhood just outside of Boston. Our house wasn't the biggest on the block, but it was nice enough that my parents took pride in hosting the occasional neighborhood barbecue. My dad, James Wilson, built his construction company from scratch, and by the time I was in high school, Wilson Construction was handling mid-sized commercial projects across the state. He loved reminding us of his humble beginnings and how hard work was the foundation of success. That was his favorite dinner table lecture, especially when directed at me. My mom, Diane, quit her teaching job when I was born to be a stay-at-home parent. She poured all her energy into creating the perfect family image, from coordinating our holiday outfits to making sure our achievements were prominently displayed. Well, some of our achievements, from as early as I can remember. There was an unspoken hierarchy in our family. My sister, Heather, 3 years younger than me, was the golden child. She had this natural charm that made everyone gravitate toward her. Where I was bookish and quiet, she was outgoing and effortlessly popular. My parents, especially my mom, adored her. "Rachel, why can't you be more like your sister?" became such a common refrain that I stopped hearing it after a while. When Heather made the cheerleading squad, my parents attended every game. When I made honor society, they skipped the ceremony because Dad had a networking event. I learned early on that the path to any recognition in my family was through academic excellence, so that's what I pursued. I graduated at the top of my class, earned a full scholarship to Boston University, and worked part-time throughout college to minimize student loans. I double majored in finance and economics, then went straight into an MBA program, all while Heather bounced between community college programs before settling on a 2-year business administration degree. After graduate school, I landed a position at a respected financial advisory firm in Boston. The salary was decent, but Boston real estate prices meant homeownership was still a distant dream. So I made the practical decision to move back home temporarily. The plan was simple: live with my parents for 2 years, pay off my remaining student loans, and save enough for a down payment. They agreed, seemingly happy to have me back. Though Mom did make several comments about how Heather had already found her path by getting married to Kevin right after college. Kevin worked for my dad's company in a position that mysteriously kept getting promoted despite his general incompetence. He was pleasant enough but had no ambition beyond what my father handed him. I converted my childhood bedroom into a functional adult space. The walls still had the pale blue paint I'd chosen at 16, but I'd replaced the twin bed with a queen and added a small desk where I could work from home when needed. The bookshelf still held my high school trophies and college textbooks, tangible reminders of the effort I'd invested in my education. It wasn't fancy, but it was my space, my sanctuary when family dynamics became too much. For the first year, things were relatively peaceful. I paid my parents a modest rent, helped with chores, and stayed out of their way. I was making good progress on my financial goals, even managing to pay off my student loans 6 months ahead of schedule. Then came the Sunday dinner that changed everything. Heather and Kevin arrived late, giggling like teenagers as they burst through the door. "We have big news," Heather announced, clutching Kevin's hand. "We're pregnant, with twins." The room erupted in celebration, Mom cried. Dad opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. I hugged my sister sincerely, genuinely happy for her despite our complicated relationship. But as the initial excitement settled, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "So we've been thinking," Mom said, refilling everyone's glasses except mine. The twins will need their own room. And that little apartment you two have is hardly big enough for one baby, let alone two. Dad nodded. We've been discussing it, and we think you should move back here temporarily. The guest room downstairs can be converted into a nursery. That's so generous, Heather gushed, while Kevin nodded eagerly. I continued eating, assuming this was the end of it. Then Mom cleared her throat. Rachel, honey, we were hoping you could move into the small office space. Your room is bigger and would be perfect for Heather and Kevin. I nearly choked on my potatoes. The office? It's half the size of my room. There's barely space for a twin bed. It would just be temporary, Dad said, though his definition of temporary had proven flexible in the past. Family has to make sacrifices for each other. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to acknowledge how unreasonable this sounded. No one did. I'm paying rent, I said finally. I have a lease agreement with you. Dad waved his hand dismissively. We'd adjust your rent, of course. The conversation moved on to nursery themes and baby names, but my mind was stuck on what had just happened. Later, when I tried to discuss it with Mom privately, she seemed genuinely confused by my hesitation. Heather needs the space more than you do. She's starting a family. And I'm building a career and saving for my future, I countered. You can do that from the office room. It's not like you're here much anyway. That was the beginning of what became 3 weeks of increasing pressure. Comments about my selfishness were dropped into casual conversation. Dad started mentioning how much he'd sacrificed for us kids. Mom began touring Heather through my room, discussing paint colors and furniture placement while I was at work. I tried compromise, suggesting that Heather and Kevin take the guest room and convert the garage into a nursery space. I offered to increase my rent to cover renovation costs. I even researched affordable apartments nearby that might work for them. None of it mattered. In my family, Heather's needs had always come before mine, and this was no exception. The situation came to a head on a rainy Friday night, after I came home to find my bookshelf emptied, its contents packed in boxes in the hallway. We thought we'd get a head start, Mom explained, not meeting my eyes. I'd never been one for confrontation, but something snapped inside me. You had no right to touch my things. This is my room. I pay to live here. What followed was the ugliest argument we'd ever had. Years of resentment poured out from both sides. Mom cried, Dad shouted, and finally, the ultimatum came. If you can't make this simple sacrifice for your sister, Dad thundered, then maybe you don't belong in this house at all. I thought we raised you better than this, Mom added, wiping away tears. Family should come first. I looked at them. These people who had always claimed to love me but had consistently shown me I was second best, and made my decision. You're right, I said quietly. I don't belong here. The silence that followed my statement was deafening. For a moment, I think they believed I was surrendering, agreeing to the tiny office conversion. But then I continued. I'll be out by the end of the weekend. Dad's face flushed. Now, Rachel, don't be dramatic. We're just asking for a simple accommodation. No, you're asking me to give up the space I pay for so that Heather can have it for free. That's not an accommodation. That's an eviction. It's not an eviction, Mom protested, though her voice lacked conviction. It's family helping family. Funny how in this family, I'm always the one expected to help, never the one receiving it. I turned and walked to my room, still my room, at least for the next 48 hours, and closed the door. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my suitcases from under the bed. I had no idea where I would go, but the certainty that I couldn't stay was overwhelming. That night, I barely slept. I scrolled through apartment listings, contacted friends about temporary accommodations, and calculated how much of my savings I would need to sacrifice for first and last month's rent plus security deposit. By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't a good one, but it was better than staying where I wasn't valued. As I packed my belongings, Mom hovered anxiously in the doorway. You don't have to leave, you know. The office room isn't that bad. I continued folding my clothes. I need to do this. For me, but where will you go? Have you thought this through? The concern in her voice almost broke my resolve. Almost. I've found a studio apartment in Somerville. It's small, but it's available immediately. Somerville? But that's not a good area. And it's so far from your office. It's what I can afford on short notice. Dad appeared behind her. If it's about money, we could loan you something to find a better place. With reasonable interest, of course. Of course. Even his offer of help came with strings attached. No thanks. I'll manage. I spent the day packing my life into boxes and suitcases. No one offered to help. Heather texted to ask if I was seriously moving out and when she could start painting her room. Not once did she suggest I might stay or express any regret about the situation. By Sunday afternoon, my car was loaded with as much as it could hold. I'd arranged to store the rest with Miranda, a colleague who had quickly become my closest friend since grad school. The studio apartment was barely 400 square feet, with a kitchenette so small you couldn't open the refrigerator and oven at the same time. But it was mine, and the lease was signed. Mom cried as I did a final check of my room. I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. I'm not being stubborn. I'm being self-respecting. We're your family, Rachel. Family doesn't treat each other this way. Dad stood by the front door, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. He'd never imagined I would actually leave, that I would choose independence over compliance. You know, you can always come back when you've calmed down, he said as I stepped onto the porch. Don't count on it. The drive to my new apartment was a blur. Tears streamed down my face as I navigated the familiar streets of my neighborhood one last time. Just as I turned the corner, my phone pinged with a text message. It was from Heather. Left some paint swatches on your desk. Which do you think would look better with the afternoon light? She hadn't even waited for me to leave the neighborhood. My new apartment was everything I'd feared. Small, dingy, with neighbors loud enough that I could follow their conversations through the thin walls. The bathroom had a persistent mildew smell, no amount of cleaning eliminated, and the single window faced a brick wall. The rent consumed nearly half my monthly income, leaving little for the savings plan I'd so carefully constructed. That first night, sitting on my hastily purchased air mattress surrounded by unpacked boxes, I allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears, but body-racking sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the family I thought I had, for the savings account now depleted, for the uncertainty ahead. But most of all, I cried because a part of me had always known this moment would come, the moment when I would finally be forced to acknowledge that in my parents' hierarchy of love, I would always come second. When the tears subsided, I made myself a promise. This setback was temporary. I would rebuild, better than before. And someday, I would create a life so successful that they would be forced to recognize their mistake. I just had no idea then how dramatically that promise would be fulfilled. 6 months into my new life, I barely recognized myself. The polished financial advisor who had once lived with her parents had been replaced by a woman who worked 14-hour days, survived on discount grocery store, coffee, and calculated every penny of her budget with religious precision. My tiny apartment remained sparsely furnished. The air mattress had been upgraded to a real bed, but I still ate at a folding table with a single chair. The financial setback of the sudden move had been significant. The emergency apartment had come with premium rent, and breaking my informal lease with my parents meant losing the security deposit I'd paid them. I'd had to purchase basic furniture and household necessities, all expenses I hadn't planned for. My carefully constructed savings plan had not just stalled, it had reversed. But I refused to fail. I refused to crawl back to my parents' house, tail between my legs, and admit they were right. Instead, I threw myself into work with renewed determination. I took on additional clients, volunteered for every project that might lead to advancement, and began developing a specialized niche advising tech startups. Boston's innovation economy was booming, and these young companies needed financial guidance from someone who understood both their unique challenges and opportunities. It was at a networking event for this tech community that I met Miranda Lewis. Tall, confident, with a laugh that drew everyone's attention, Miranda was the marketing director for a successful biotech startup. We bonded over being women in male-dominated spaces, and soon our professional connection evolved into friendship. "You need to get out of that depressing shoebox," she declared after visiting my apartment for the first time. "My roommate just moved out. The room's yours if you want it." Moving in with Miranda changed everything. Her apartment in Cambridge was spacious, sunny, and close to several tech incubators. My commute shortened by 30 minutes, and my rent decreased despite the improved living conditions. But most importantly, I now had someone in my corner. "Your parents did what?" Miranda exclaimed when I finally shared the full story of my departure. "That's not family, that's emotional extortion." Hearing someone validate my feelings was more healing than I could have imagined. Miranda became not just a roommate, but a supporter, introducing me to her extensive network in the tech industry and encouraging me to see my worth beyond my family's estimation. "You're too good for their narrow vision," she'd say. "Build something they can't ignore." The holidays proved challenging. I declined my parents' perfunctory invitation to Thanksgiving dinner, choosing instead to join Miranda's family celebration. Christmas brought awkward text messages and a small package containing a generic gift card and photos of Heather's ultrasound. I sent back polite thank you notes and gifts for the expected twins, maintaining the bare minimum of contact. Occasionally, I'd run into family members around town. A grocery store encounter with Mom led to strained small talk about the weather. Spotting Dad at a local coffee shop resulted in him pretending not to see me. Heather, now visibly pregnant, waved enthusiastically from across a department store but made no effort to approach. These encounters always left me emotionally drained, but they also reinforced my determination. I wasn't ready to forgive, and they weren't ready to understand what they'd done wrong. The distance between us grew with each passing month. Meanwhile, my professional life flourished. My growing expertise with tech startups began attracting attention. Clients referred friends and colleagues. My boss recognized my expanding client base and approved a modest raise. I also started attending therapy, another expense I hadn't planned for but couldn't afford to skip. Dr. Chen helped me understand the family dynamics that had shaped me, the golden child syndrome that had elevated Heather, the impossible standards I'd set for myself to earn approval, the pattern of sacrificing my needs to keep the peace. "You didn't break your family by leaving," she reminded me during one particularly difficult session. "You simply stopped letting them break you." Those words became my mantra on the difficult days, the ones when I questioned my decision or felt the ache of family ties stretched to breaking. By the 1-year anniversary of my departure, I had established a new routine, created a small but supportive social circle, and rebuilt some of my depleted savings. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, governed by my choices rather than my family's expectations. And then came the opportunity that would change everything. It began with a LinkedIn message from someone named Alex Mercer, founder of a startup called DataStream. The message was brief. "Heard you're the person to talk to about financial planning for tech startups. Could use your expertise. Coffee?" I almost deleted it as spam. Startup founders rarely sought financial advice until they were in trouble, and troubled startups couldn't afford my fees. But something about the directness of the message intrigued me, and I agreed to meet. Alex turned out to be Alexandra, a brilliant software engineer with wild curly hair and intense focus. She arrived with a laptop covered in stickers from tech conferences and ordered the largest coffee on the menu. "I'll get right to it," she said after brief introductions. "I've developed an algorithm that analyzes consumer spending patterns to predict market trends up to 18 months in advance. Early tests show 87% accuracy. I need someone to help structure the company finances as we scale." She opened her laptop and showed me preliminary data that made my financial advisor brain light up. If her claims were legitimate, this wasn't just another app, this was revolutionary technology with implications for every industry from retail to real estate. "I should be upfront," I told her. "My fees aren't insignificant, and early-stage startups typically—" "I'm not offering to pay you," Alex interrupted. "At least not entirely in cash. I'm offering you equity. 1% now, potential for more based on milestones, plus a reduced consulting fee." I nearly laughed. Equity in startups was like lottery tickets worth millions in theory, worthless in reality. "Take 2 weeks to consider," Alex said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. "Review the data. Research me. Do your due diligence. But decide soon. We're moving fast." That night, I analyzed her data until 2 a.m. I researched Alex's background. MIT graduate, former Google engineer, 2 previous successful exits. I ran the numbers, calculated the risk, and consulted with colleagues I trusted. 2 weeks later, I accepted her offer. What followed were the most intense months of my professional life. By day, I maintained my regular client load. By night and weekends, I worked with DataStream, helping structure their finances, prepare for investor pitches, and develop scalable financial models. The DataStream team quickly became like family, the kind of family that valued each member's contribution. Alex led with a combination of brilliance and humility that inspired loyalty. The core team of 6 worked out of a converted warehouse space, fueled by takeout and determination. Miranda joined as marketing director 3 months in, bringing her expertise and enthusiasm. My world expanded with the company, my confidence growing alongside our success metrics. 6 months after I joined DataStream, we secured our first major funding round, $3 million from a respected venture capital firm. The validation was exhilarating, but more meaningful was Alex's acknowledgement at the celebration dinner. "We wouldn't be here without Rachel," she told the team, raising a glass. Her financial strategy gave investors confidence in our vision. It was the recognition I'd always craved but never received from my own family. Speaking of family, occasional interactions continued. I'd moved to a nicer apartment closer to the DataStream office, which happened to be in my parents' preferred shopping district. These coincidental meetings were becoming harder to avoid. One such encounter occurred at a business networking event. I was representing DataStream, conversing with potential investors, when I spotted my father across the room. He was talking animatedly to a group of men in suits, potential clients for his construction company, I assumed. Our eyes met briefly. He excused himself and approached. "Rachel, didn't expect to see you here." "Dad." Likewise. He glanced at my name tag, which identified me as Financial Director, DataStream. "Playing business with the startup kids now?" His tone was dismissive. "Thought you had a real job at Henderson Financial." The comment stung, but I maintained my composure. "I do both. DataStream is a significant opportunity." Well, startups are risky. Don't put all your eggs in that basket. Construction is stable, always has been, always will be. Before I could respond, Alex appeared at my side. "Rachel, the Andreessen partners want to continue our discussion." "Oh, hello." I made brief introductions. Dad straightened, suddenly more attentive now that a potential networking opportunity had presented itself. "Your daughter is invaluable to our company, Mr. Wilson," Alex said. "Her financial strategy has been central to our success." Dad nodded, his expression unreadable. "Well, good to hear." He handed Alex his business card. "If you ever need construction services for your office expansion, Wilson Construction has 30 years of experience." After he walked away, Alex raised an eyebrow. "That's your father? The one who kicked you out?" "The very same. Interesting. He seemed very self-important? Condescending?" I was going to say short-sighted, but those work too. That encounter fueled me through the next rounds of late nights and strategic planning sessions. I channeled my frustration into determination, using my father's dismissal as motivation to prove him wrong. The breakthrough came 14 months after I joined DataStream. Amazon approached us with acquisition interest. Their consumer data analytics team had been watching our progress and recognized the potential of Alex's algorithm for their global operations. The negotiations were intense, stretching over weeks of meetings, due diligence, and legal consultations. When the final offer came in, we gathered in the conference room to discuss. $240 million, Alex announced. With retention bonuses and continued development funding, the room erupted in celebration. High fives, hugs, champagne popping. I sat frozen, mentally calculating what my 1% equity stake meant. $2.4 million. Before taxes, but still, $2.4 million. Miranda squeezed my shoulder. "You okay? You look like you might pass out." I couldn't find the words. "I'm financially independent." Later that night, alone in my apartment, I pulled up my financial planning spreadsheet, the one I'd been meticulously maintaining since graduate school. I updated the figures, adjusting for taxes and investment projections. The realization hit me like a physical force. I could buy a house, not in 5 years or 10 years. Now, cash, if I wanted to. I poured myself a glass of wine, walked to the window, and looked out at the Boston skyline. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely untethered from my parents' expectations and judgments. I was no longer the desperate daughter who'd been kicked out with nowhere to go. I was free. If you've ever had that moment when everything changes in an instant, you know exactly what I felt. That pivot point where you realize all your hard work has finally paid off. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about career breakthroughs and how to spot life-changing opportunities. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because this is where things get really interesting. My decision to look for a house wasn't immediate. For weeks, I let the reality of my new financial situation sink in, consulting with financial advisors and tax specialists to ensure I managed this windfall responsibly. After setting aside money for taxes, creating a diversified investment portfolio, and establishing a retirement fund, I still had more than enough for a substantial real estate purchase. It was Miranda who finally pushed me to take the plunge. "You've been browsing Zillow for weeks," she pointed out one evening. "Just call a realtor already." "It's a big decision," I hedged. "I want to make sure I pick the right location." "Oh, please. We both know you're going to buy in Brookline. You've had the neighborhood notifications set up since the acquisition closed." She wasn't wrong. Despite everything, I was drawn back to the tree-lined streets where I'd grown up. Not because of nostalgia, but because it represented something I'd been denied, belonging in a place I loved on my own terms. The next day, I called Emma Johnston, a childhood friend who'd become a successful real estate agent in the area. We hadn't spoken in years, but she remembered me immediately. "Rachel Wilson, I heard you were making waves in the tech world. What can I do for you?" "I'm looking to buy a house. In Brookline, preferably. Perfect timing. The market there is hot but not overheated. What's your budget range?" I named a figure that made her pause. "Well, that opens up some interesting possibilities. Let me put together some options." For the next 2 weeks, Emma showed me properties across Brookline and neighboring areas. Colonial revivals, Tudor-inspired homes, modern constructions with smart home features. Each had its appeal, but none felt quite right. Then came the call that changed everything. "Rachel, something just hit the market that I think you need to see immediately. It's on Maple Street." My heart skipped. Maple Street? Yes. Directly across from your parents' house. The Jenkins place. The Jenkins had been our neighbors for as long as I could remember. Their colonial revival with the wraparound porch had been the backdrop to countless childhood memories, catching fireflies on their lawn, admiring Mrs. Jenkins' immaculate flower beds, trick-or-treating at their door for the full-sized candy bars they always gave out. "They're selling?" "Mr. Jenkins always said he'd die in that house. He's moving to Florida to be near his grandchildren. The house needs updates, but the bones are solid. It's going to move fast. I'll see it today." Emma met me at the property that afternoon. Standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the familiar facade, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, nostalgia, anticipation, and something else I couldn't quite name. "You're sure about this?" Emma asked quietly. "Buying directly across from your parents is, well, it's a statement." "Let's just look at the house," I replied. Inside, the Jenkins home was exactly as I remembered, but tired. The once gleaming hardwood floors needed refinishing. The kitchen, last updated in the 1,990 seconds, was functional but dated. The formal dining room with its bay window still offered the perfect view of my parents' front porch. It was larger than my parents' house. 4 bedrooms to their 3, with higher ceilings and more natural light. The backyard was deeper, with mature maple trees providing privacy and shade. The detached 2-car garage had a second-floor space that could be converted into a home office. "It has potential," I said carefully, not wanting to reveal how much I already wanted it. Emma nodded. "Needs work, but nothing structural. Cosmetic updates, maybe a kitchen renovation. You could make it spectacular." As we toured the upstairs, I caught movement from across the street. A curtain falling back into place in what had been my bedroom window. Heather. Watching. How quickly can I make an offer? I asked. You're serious about this? Completely. You know this isn't just about buying a house, right? This is about making a point. I considered her words. Was I doing this for revenge? To rub my success in my family's faces? It's not about revenge, I said finally. It's about reclaiming something I lost. This neighborhood was my home too. Why should I let them define where I belong? Emma studied me for a moment, then nodded. I'll draw up the paperwork. Given your financial situation, I recommend offering cash, slightly above asking price. In this market, that should secure it without a bidding war. 3 days later, my offer was accepted. 2 weeks after that, we closed a record even in the accelerated world of cash purchases. I now owned the house across from my parents. I hired contractors to begin renovations immediately. The scope grew as we discovered opportunities to improve the already beautiful home. Hardwood floors were refinished to a warm honey glow. The kitchen was gutted and rebuilt with professional-grade appliances and custom cabinetry. The main bathroom became a spa-like retreat, with a soaking tub and walk-in shower. I worked with an interior designer to select furniture and finishes that reflected my personal style, modern but warm, with touches of color against neutral backgrounds. The formal living room became a library with built-in bookshelves and a reading nook in the bay window. The sunroom off the kitchen was transformed into a bright home office where I could work while looking out at the garden. Throughout the renovation process, I visited regularly to check progress. These visits didn't go unnoticed. Once, while discussing light fixtures with the contractor, I spotted Heather walking by, pushing a double stroller. She slowed, staring openly at the construction activity. Our eyes met briefly before she hurried away. Another time, Dad's truck drove past, deliberately slowing. He didn't stop, but I could feel his curiosity like a physical presence. The renovations took 3 months. By the time they were complete, I had created not just a house but a statement. One of success, independence, and quiet defiance. The day before my scheduled move, Emma stopped by with a housewarming gift. It's beautiful, Rachel, truly. Thank you. For everything. She hesitated. You know they're having their annual summer barbecue tomorrow? Who? Your parents. The whole neighborhood is invited, as usual. Your moving trucks will arrive right in the middle of it. I hadn't planned it that way. It was genuinely coincidental. But the symmetry was too perfect to ignore. Well, I said with a small smile, I guess that's one way to announce I'm back in the neighborhood. Moving day dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect New England summer day that features in nostalgic films. I arrived early, dressed carefully in white linen pants and a blue silk blouse. Professional, polished, successful. My hair was styled, makeup subtle but flawless. Image shouldn't matter, but I knew it would. The moving truck arrived at 11 a.m., right on schedule. I stood in the driveway, clipboard in hand, directing the movers with calm efficiency. Across the street, my parents' front yard was already filling with neighbors for their annual barbecue. The familiar setup, rented tables covered with checkered cloths, Dad's oversized grill billowing smoke, Mom arranging platters of her famous potato salad and coleslaw. I could feel the stares, the whispered conversations, the subtle pointing in my direction. I maintained my composure, focusing on the task at hand while projecting an air of casual confidence I didn't entirely feel. The first direct acknowledgement came from Mrs. Peterson, our elderly neighbor from 2 doors down, who crossed the street with remarkable speed for someone using a cane. Rachel Wilson, is that really you buying the Jenkins place? What a wonderful surprise. Her genuine delight was touching. Yes, Mrs. Peterson, just moving in today. Well, isn't that something? You know, I always said you were going places. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Your mother nearly fainted when she heard who bought it. Wouldn't speak to Agnes from the garden club for a week after she sold it to you. I smiled politely, unsure how to respond. Mrs. Peterson patted my arm. You come by for tea sometime. I want to hear all about what you've been up to. As she returned to the party, I saw my father detach himself from a group of men clustered around the grill. He crossed the street with deliberate strides, his expression a careful blank. Rachel. Dad. He glanced at the moving truck, then at the house. So, you bought the Jenkins place. I did. Cash purchase. From what I hear. Of course, he'd asked around about the sale details. That's right. His eyes narrowed slightly. Construction business must be treating you well. I'm not in construction. That startup thing then? I met his gaze steadily. Data stream. Yes, we were acquired last year. Acquired. He tested the word like an unfamiliar food. And that's how you. He gestured vaguely at the house, the moving truck, my carefully cultivated appearance of success. I was compensated for my equity stake, yes. A flicker of something surprise, respect, crossed his face before he controlled it. Must have been quite the payout. It was fair. We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why here, Rachel? Of all the places you could buy, why directly across from us? Before I could answer, Mom appeared at his side, with Heather trailing behind her. Mom looked older than I remembered, more lines around her eyes, her hair showing more gray. Heather had lost the pregnancy weight but had the harried look of a mother of young twins. We thought someone was playing a practical joke when we heard, Mom said without preamble. The Jenkins selling to you, of all people. Hello to you too, Mom. She flushed slightly. Of course, hello. It's been a while. 2 years, 3 months, I supplied. Since Dad gave me the ultimatum to give up my room or leave. Heather's eyes widened. Is that what this is about? You're still mad about the room thing? That was ages ago. It's not about the room, Heather. It was never about the room. Then what is it about? Dad demanded. Why buy a house right across from us if not to make some kind of point? I liked the house. I know the neighborhood. The location works for me. And the fact that we have to see you every day has nothing to do with it? Mom's voice had taken on the injured tone I knew so well. I didn't consider how you'd feel about it, actually. Just like you didn't consider how I'd feel about being evicted from my home. Dad's face darkened. You weren't evicted. You chose to leave. Because the alternative was being relegated to a glorified closet so Heather could have my space. Again. We were trying to help your sister, Mom protested. She had twins on the way. And I was trying to build a life. But my needs never mattered as much as hers, did they? The conversation was drawing attention from the barbecue guests. Neighbors were watching with barely concealed interest. Dad noticed and lowered his voice. Why don't you come over? Join the barbecue. We can discuss this as a family. The invitation surprised me. I can't. I have a moving truck to supervise. Later then. Dinner. I looked at him, then at Mom and Heather. Their expressions ranged from Dad's grudging acceptance to Mom's anxious hope to Heather's barely concealed resentment. I don't think that's a good idea. Not today. Mom's face fell. But you're home now. We should celebrate. I'm not home, Mom. I have a home. This is my house, not a return to the family fold. So what, you're going to live across from us but not speak to us? Heather asked incredulously. That's mature. I didn't buy this house to spite you, contrary to what you seem to think. I bought it because I wanted it. How we proceed as neighbors is up to all of us. The conversation might have deteriorated further, but at that moment, a moving truck arrived, distracting everyone. Mom tried to peer around me toward the house. Maybe we could just see what you've done with the place? Agnes said you've been renovating for months. Not today, Mom. I have a lot to manage right now. The disappointment on her face was genuine. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Another time, perhaps, I added, softening slightly. Dad nodded curtly. Well, welcome to the neighborhood, I guess. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, the house looks good. You did a nice job with the exterior paint. It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd received from him in years. I nodded acknowledgement. As they walked away, Heather lingered behind. So you're rich now? Big shot financial genius with your fancy house and designer clothes? I did well on an investment opportunity. Yes. Must be nice, having everything handed to you. I almost laughed at the irony. Nothing was handed to me, Heather. Quite the opposite. Whatever. She glanced back at our parents, now returning to their guests. Just so you know, they've been different since you left. Mom cries on your birthday. Dad checks your LinkedIn profile when he thinks no one's watching. The revelation unsettled me. Are you trying to make me feel guilty? I'm trying to tell you they missed you, even if they're too stubborn to say it. She shrugged. But hey, enjoy your revenge house. Hope it makes you happy. As she walked away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also a faint sadness for what had been lost, what might never be recovered. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Miranda, who pulled up in her red convertible with impeccable timing. "Wow, family reunion going on?" she asked, climbing out of the car. I saw the Wilson clan heading back to their barbecue, looking like they'd swallowed lemons. Just establishing neighborhood relations. Miranda surveyed the scene, the moving truck, the barbecue across the street, my slightly shaken expression. "You okay?" "I will be." She squeezed my arm. "Come on, let's get you moved in properly. And then tonight, we'll open that bottle of champagne I brought and toast to your fabulous new life in full view of the front window." Naturally, I laughed, the tension breaking. "You're terrible. That's why you love me." As we turned toward the house, my house, I caught a glimpse of my parents watching from their yard. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if things might have been different if they'd simply valued me as much as they valued Heather, if they'd considered my needs as worthy of accommodation as hers, but that was the past. And standing on the porch of my beautiful new home, I was finally ready to focus on the future. 3 months passed in a blur of settling in, establishing new routines, and adjusting to life as a homeowner. My house quickly became everything I'd hoped for: comfortable, elegant, a true reflection of my personality and achievements. I planted flowers in the front beds, installed a fire pit in the backyard, and painted the porch furniture a cheerful blue that complemented the classic white exterior. The neighborhood dynamics were fascinating to navigate. Longtime residents who had known me since childhood stopped by with welcome gifts and thinly veiled curiosity. Mrs. Peterson became a regular visitor, bringing homemade cookies and neighborhood gossip in equal measure. Mr. Abernathy from the corner house hired me to help reorganize his retirement portfolio after learning about my financial expertise. Even the new families, who had no history with the Wilson drama, seemed to instinctively understand that there was a story behind my purchase of the house, directly across from my parents'. My family's reactions varied widely. Dad attempted casual normalcy, waving when our paths crossed and occasionally commenting on my gardening efforts or the weather. These interactions were stiff but civil. Mom was more persistent in her reconciliation attempts. She appeared on my doorstep at least weekly, bearing food, household items, or neighborhood news. Each visit included an awkward pause at the threshold where she clearly hoped to be invited in. Sometimes I relented, allowing her brief access to the foyer or kitchen. Other times I accepted her offerings with polite thanks but maintained the boundary of the doorway. "I found these curtains and thought they might work in your guest room," she said during one such visit, extending a shopping bag. "Thank you, but I've already ordered custom blinds for all the bedrooms." Oh, her disappointment was palpable. "Well, maybe for another room then. The fabric is very nice quality." "I appreciate the thought, Mom. Your hydrangeas are coming in beautifully. You must have your father's touch with plants." I smiled thinly. Actually, I consulted with a professional landscaper. The soil needed specific amendments for that particular variety. Each interaction followed a similar pattern, her attempting to establish connection through domestic matters, me politely but firmly asserting my independence. Heather's approach was less direct but more complicated. She would pointedly ignore me when pushing her stroller past my house, then text hours later with questions about insurance providers or local preschools. The twins, now active toddlers, became unwitting pawns in her passive-aggressive game, simultaneously keeping them away from their aunt while sending photos with captions like, "They keep asking about their Aunt Rachel." The situation with Dad took an unexpected turn when I noticed him eyeing the renovation work on my detached garage. I'd hired contractors to convert the upper level into a deluxe home office with skylights and custom built-ins. One evening, as I was checking the day's progress, he appeared at the edge of my driveway. Cedar shakes on the exterior, he observed. Good choice for this climate. Thanks, the contractor recommended them. He nodded, hands in his pockets. Wilson Construction uses the same supplier. Quality product. I'll take your word for it. A pause. Your contractor doing the interior work too? Yes. Full conversion to a home office. He scuffed at the ground with his shoe. I could take a look at it sometime. If you want, no charge, just professional courtesy. The offer surprised me. I think we're good. The team comes highly recommended. Of course. His disappointment was subtle but unmistakable. Well, offer stands if you change your mind. It was the first time he'd extended help without mentioning loans, interest, or business opportunities. I wasn't ready to accept, but I recognized it for what it was, an awkward attempt at connection. As autumn approached, Mom intensified her reconciliation campaign. She left information about neighborhood events on my porch. She mentioned family gatherings with increasing frequency. She enlisted neighbors to casually mention how nice it would be if the Wilsons were all together again. Then came the inevitable invitation to their annual Halloween party, a tradition from my childhood that typically drew half the neighborhood. It would mean so much if you came, Mom said, extending the orange and black invitation card. Just for a little while. People keep asking about you. I hesitated. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Please, Rachel. You can bring friends if you want. That nice girl who visits you, Miranda? She's welcome too. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The night of the party, Miranda and I crossed the street together, bearing a bottle of wine and a carefully neutral expression. The house was decorated with the same paper skeletons and plastic pumpkins that had been used since my childhood. The familiar scent of Mom's apple cider and cinnamon filling the air. Neighbors greeted me warmly, some with genuine affection, others with barely concealed fascination at the family drama playing out before them. Dad, dressed in his annual vampire costume, complete with plastic fangs that impeded his speech, nodded stiffly when I entered, but kept his distance. Mom fluttered about in her witch outfit, visibly relieved that I'd actually shown up. Heather, dressed as a fairy princess to match her twin girls, watched me warily from across the room. Well, this isn't awkward at all, Miranda muttered under her breath. The evening proceeded with superficial pleasantries until Mrs. Peterson, never one for social subtlety, raised her glass and announced, "Isn't it wonderful to have all the Wilsons together again? Rachel, dear, you must tell everyone about your marvelous career success. Diane mentioned you're quite the financial wizard now." The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me. Mom smiled encouragingly. Dad removed his plastic fangs. Heather's expression soured. "I've been fortunate," I said carefully. "My work with tech startups has been rewarding." "She's being modest," piped up Mr. Abernathy. "Rachel completely transformed my retirement portfolio. Increased returns by 12% in just 2 months. Rachel always was the smart one," Mom said proudly, as if the past 2 years of estrangement hadn't happened. "She gets that from me," Dad added, with no trace of irony. The conversation might have continued in this vein of revised family history if not for Heather's abrupt interruption. "Oh, please, now you're acting like she's the golden child? What happened to 'family comes first and sacrifices have to be made'?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the gathering. Mom's face flushed. Dad cleared his throat. "Heather, this isn't the time." "When is the time, Dad?" "When she's not around to hear how different everything was after she left. How you two fell apart for months. How you," she pointed at Mom, "cried every time you passed her empty room. How you, now at Dad, checked her social media constantly but were too proud to call her." I stood frozen, unprepared for this outburst or the raw emotion behind it. Miranda squeezed my arm in silent support. "I think we should go," I said quietly. "No, stay," Heather continued, her voice rising. "Stay and enjoy being the prodigal daughter. Everyone's so impressed with your big house and your fancy job. No one remembers that you abandoned your family when things got tough." "Heather!" Mom gasped. "That's enough." "Is it?" Because while Rachel was off building her perfect life, things weren't so perfect here. Kevin lost his job at Dad's company. The twins had medical issues. We struggled. But heaven forbid anyone ask successful Rachel for help. The party guests were now openly staring, some with embarrassment, others with undisguised fascination. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, not from shame, but from anger. "You want to talk about abandonment?" I said, my voice controlled but intense. "How about being told to give up your home or leave? How about having your needs consistently placed last? How about not a single person in your family standing up for you or considering your perspective?" Heather opened her mouth to respond, but I continued, years of pent-up feelings finally finding voice. And for the record, I would have helped with the twins' medical bills if anyone had asked. I would have helped Kevin find a new job. But no one called. No one texted. No one thought to reach out to me except when it involved showing off the house or playing happy family for the neighbors. The room had gone completely silent. Dad stared at the floor. Mom looked on the verge of tears. Even Heather seemed taken aback by the emotion in my voice. I took a deep breath. I didn't abandon this family. This family decided I wasn't essential unless I was serving someone else's needs. With that, I set down my untouched drink and walked out, Miranda close behind. We crossed the street in silence. The cheerful Halloween decorations on my own porch, a stark contrast to the tension we'd left behind. Inside my house, Miranda poured us both a generous glass of wine. "Well," she said after a long moment, "that was quite the family reunion." I laughed despite myself, the tension breaking. Not exactly the reconciliation Mom was hoping for. Maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes the wound has to be reopened before it can heal properly. I wasn't sure if healing was possible or even what I wanted. But as I looked out my window at the house across the street, where the party had subdued considerably after our departure, I realized something important. I no longer felt the ache of exclusion that had haunted me for so long. Whatever happened with my family going forward, I had built a life that was wholly mine. A success they couldn't diminish or claim credit for. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. 6 months passed in relative calm. Winter blanketed the neighborhood in snow, providing a natural buffer between houses and reducing casual interactions. I threw myself into work, taking on new clients and expanding my consultancy beyond tech startups to include established companies seeking innovation strategies. My home became a sanctuary, warm, comfortable, and distinctly mine. The Halloween confrontation had reset family dynamics in unexpected ways. Mom's reconciliation campaign quieted, replaced by more genuine but less frequent overtures. Dad maintained polite distance but occasionally nodded approval at my property improvements. Heather retreated entirely, focusing on her family as rumors circulated about troubles in her marriage. I established my own routines and relationships in the neighborhood. Sunday brunches with Miranda became a tradition. I joined the local business association and occasionally hosted meetings in my renovated home office. I dated casually, though nothing serious developed. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm that felt entirely of my own making. Then came the call that changed everything again. It was a Tuesday evening in early spring. I was preparing dinner when my phone rang, displaying Mom's number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Our last conversation had been awkward at best, but something prompted me to answer. "Rachel?" Her voice was tight with panic. "It's your father. He's had a heart attack. We're at Boston General. They're taking him into surgery now." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Despite everything, despite the hurt and distance, he was still my father. "I'm on my way." I arrived at the hospital to find Mom pacing the waiting room, her face drawn with worry. Heather sat nearby, the twins asleep across her lap, her own expression a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "What happened?" I asked, setting my purse down. "He was at a job site," Mom explained, twisting her wedding ring anxiously. "Chest pain, then collapse. The foreman called an ambulance. The doctors say it's serious," Heather added, her earlier hostility absent in the face of crisis. "Triple bypass." I nodded, processing. "Have you spoken with his doctors? Do you understand the procedure?" "They tried to explain," Mom said helplessly. "Something about blockages and grafts. I couldn't really follow." "I'll talk to them," I said, falling naturally into the role of problem solver. "Have you contacted the insurance company?" Arranged for coverage of his projects? Mom looked at me blankly. I didn't even think about that. For the next several hours, I became the family coordinator. I spoke with doctors, translating medical terminology into language Mom could understand. I contacted Dad's insurance provider to confirm coverage. I called his foreman to arrange temporary management of ongoing projects. I ordered food for everyone when it became clear the surgery would extend well into the night. Miranda arrived around 10 p.m., bringing fresh coffee and quiet support. "Anything I can do?" she asked. "You're doing it," I replied gratefully. It was nearly midnight when the surgeon finally appeared, still in scrubs, looking tired but satisfied. The surgery was successful, he told us. The blockages were severe, but we've established good blood flow with the bypass grafts. He's stable and in recovery. Mom burst into tears of relief. Heather hugged her sleeping daughters closer. I thanked the doctor and asked about recovery protocols and follow-up care. He'll need to make significant lifestyle changes, the surgeon advised. Diet, exercise, stress management. Heart disease is serious, but with proper care, he can lead a normal life. We were allowed to see him briefly in recovery, pale, intubated, vulnerable in ways I'd never associated with my strong, stubborn father. Mom went first, touching his face with trembling fingers. Heather followed, whispering something I couldn't hear. When my turn came, I stood beside the bed, looking down at the man who had shaped so much of my life, for better and worse. His eyes flickered open briefly, registering my presence with surprise before drifting closed again. I placed my hand lightly over his and simply said, "Rest now. We're taking care of everything." The days that followed established a new family paradigm. Dad remained in the hospital for a week, gradually improving but still weaker than anyone had ever seen him. I took temporary leave from work to help Mom navigate the medical system and insurance paperwork. Heather managed the twins and brought food to the hospital daily. On the third day, I was alone with Dad when he fully awakened from a nap, lucid and alert for the first time since surgery. "Rachel," he said, his voice hoarse, "you're still here. Where else would I be?" He considered this, then asked, "Why?" After everything, I thought carefully before answering. "Because you're my father. And because some things are more important than old grudges." He was silent for so long, I thought he might have fallen asleep again. Then, with visible effort, he reached for my hand. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About the room. About everything." The admission stunned me. In all my life, I had never heard my father acknowledge a mistake, especially one of his own making. "Nearly dying changes your perspective," he continued. "Makes you see what matters. Dad, you don't need to." "I do." His grip tightened slightly. "I was unfair to you. Always held you to a different standard than Heather. Expected more, gave less. I told myself it was because you were stronger, more capable. The truth is, I took you for granted." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "Dad, this isn't the time." "When is the time, Rachel? When I'm actually dead?" He attempted a weak smile. "I'm proud of you. Should have said it years ago. Proud of what you've accomplished. On your own. Despite us. Not because of us." The words I'd longed to hear for so long now felt bittersweet. "Thank you," I managed. "Your house looks good," he added, changing topics with typical Wilson abruptness. "Better than Jenkins ever kept it. Did they fix that leak in the sunroom?" And just like that, we were talking about construction and renovation. Familiar territory where we could both feel comfortable. But something fundamental had shifted and acknowledgement had been made that couldn't be unmade. Dad's recovery continued at home, where I found myself visiting with increasing frequency. I helped organize his medical care, set up a prescription delivery service, and created a spreadsheet tracking his recovery milestones. Mom watched with a mixture of gratitude and amazement as I efficiently managed the aspects of care that overwhelmed her. "You're so good at this," she said one afternoon as I updated Dad's medication schedule. "So organized. I never knew what to do with that quality when you were growing up." "What do you mean?" She sighed, sinking into a kitchen chair. Heather was easy to understand. She wanted attention, approval, things. You wanted systems, order, recognition. I didn't know how to give you what you needed. It was the closest she'd ever come to acknowledging our dysfunctional family dynamic. I wanted to be valued, I said quietly, not just tolerated or accommodated when convenient. I know that now. She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit. Seeing you these past weeks, handling everything with such competence, I realize we never gave you enough credit. We saw your strength as a reason to focus on Heather, when we should have been celebrating it. These conversations, halting, sometimes awkward, but honest, became more frequent as Dad's recovery progressed. Slowly, painfully, the Wilson family began to acknowledge and address patterns established decades earlier. Meanwhile, Heather's marriage continued to deteriorate. Kevin, struggling to find stable employment after leaving Dad's company, had become increasingly unreliable. One evening, she appeared on my doorstep after the twins were asleep, visibly distraught. I need advice, she admitted reluctantly. Financial advice. I invited her in, served tea, and listened as she outlined their situation: mounting debt, missed mortgage payments, Kevin's gambling problem concealed until recently. My professional training kicked in automatically, asking relevant questions and assessing options. Why come to me? I asked finally. Why not Dad or Mom? She stared into her tea. Dad's still recovering. Mom would panic. And, you know what you're doing. With money. A pause. With everything, really. I can help you create a financial plan, I offered. If you want. I don't deserve your help. This isn't about deserving, Heather. It's about what you need right now. She looked up, tears glistening. I was awful to you. At the Halloween party. And before. All those years. Yes, you were, I agreed, not unkindly. But I wasn't exactly bringing out the best in you either. A ghost of a smile. God, we were a mess, weren't we? Still are. Maybe. But maybe we can do better. That conversation marked the beginning of a new relationship with my sister. Not best friends, not even particularly close, but honest in ways we had never been before. I helped her create a financial recovery plan. She began consulting me before making major decisions. We established boundaries that we both respected. As summer approached, Dad's health improved enough for him to take short walks around the neighborhood. Often, he would stop at my house to rest on the porch, commenting on my landscaping choices or the neighbor's roof replacement. Sometimes we talked about his business or my work. Other times, we simply sat in comfortable silence, watching the street life unfold. During one such visit, he mentioned casually, "Your mother's birthday is next month." I know. I've already sent a card. I was thinking something more. A dinner, maybe. At your place. He looked around the porch appreciatively. Show off this beautiful home you've created. The suggestion took me by surprise. You want me to host Mom's birthday dinner? If you're willing. The whole family. Nothing fancy. I considered the implications opening my home to the family that had once excluded me, creating a new memory to replace painful ones. I'll think about it, I promised. 2 weeks later, I sent invitations for a formal dinner party at my house, celebrating Mom's 65th birthday. The RSVP cards returned promptly, Dad and Mom accepting with visible delight. Dad had added a handwritten note. Looking forward to it. T. Heather confirming for herself but noting Kevin would be traveling for work. The evening of the dinner, I prepared everything meticulously. Mom's favorite foods, flowers from her preferred florist, a cake from the bakery she'd always splurged on for special occasions. Miranda helped with final arrangements before discreetly departing, understanding this was a family moment that didn't require her presence. When my parents arrived, Mom gasped at the transformation of the familiar Jenkins house. "Oh, Rachel, it's beautiful. You've made it so elegant." I gave them a tour: the renovated kitchen, the library with built-in bookshelves, the sunroom office with its view of blooming gardens. Dad noticed and commented on construction details. Mom admired decorative choices. Both seemed genuinely impressed by the home I'd created. Heather arrived with the twins, now active 3-year-olds, who explored every corner with curious fingers. Dinner proceeded with surprisingly easy conversation, reminiscences of happier family times, and discussions of future plans. After dessert, Dad cleared his throat, a familiar signal that he had something important to say. We all quieted automatically. a family habit deeply ingrained. "I want to say something," he began, reaching for Mom's hand. "This past year has taught me a lot about what matters. Almost dying has a way of clarifying things." He looked at each of us in turn, his expression unusually open. "We haven't been the family we should have been. Especially to you, Rachel. I can't change the past, but I want you to know I see it clearly now. The favoritism, the unfair expectations, the ultimatum that drove you away." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "I'm proud of the woman you've become. Prouder still that you've found your way back to us, even when we didn't deserve it." Mom wiped tears from her eyes. Heather looked down at her plate. I sat still, absorbing the acknowledgement I'd waited so long to hear. "I don't know if we can ever make it right," Dad continued, "but I hope we can build something new. Something better." In the silence that followed, I realized we had reached a turning point, not a magical resolution of all hurts, but a genuine recognition of what had gone wrong and a commitment to do better. "I'd like that," I said finally. As the evening concluded and I stood on my porch watching my family cross the street to their homes, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The houses remained the same, the physical distance unchanged, but the emotional landscape had shifted irrevocably. Sometimes, it seemed, the longest journey was the one that led you right back where you started, but with new eyes to see it differently. 1 year after my housewarming, I hosted another gathering, this time a proper party celebrating both my home anniversary and my recently announced partnership at one of Boston's premier financial advisory firms. The guest list included colleagues, friends, neighbors, and yes, family. My backyard was transformed with string lights, comfortable seating areas, and catered food stations. Miranda had overseen the decorations, insisting on something worthy of Instagram to mark the occasion. "This is quite the spread," Thomas remarked, bringing me a fresh glass of wine. Thomas Brewer had entered my life 6 months earlier, a corporate attorney I'd met through a mutual client. Our relationship had progressed with refreshing directness and mutual respect. "Your parents seem to be enjoying themselves." I glanced across the yard where Mom and Dad were chatting with my neighbors. Dad, fully recovered from his heart surgery, had adopted the recommended lifestyle changes with surprising commitment. He'd lost weight, started walking daily, and even learned to cook heart-healthy meals, a skill he'd proudly demonstrated at our now regular family dinners. "They've come a long way," I acknowledged. "So have you," Thomas noted. "From what you've told me about your history, it was true. The journey from being the daughter who'd been asked to leave to the successful woman hosting gatherings in her own home had been transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated. The house that had once represented defiance and vindication had become simply my home, comfortable, welcoming, an expression of who I was, rather than a statement about my past." As the evening progressed, guests mingled across the yard. My work colleagues exchanged business cards with Dad's construction contacts. Miranda's tech friends debated market trends with my financial industry associates. Heather, who had recently finalized her divorce from Kevin, introduced her twins to everyone with the proud enthusiasm of a single mother finding her footing. After dinner, Dad approached me with a slightly conspiratorial air. "Got a minute? I want to show you something." He led me to a quiet corner of the yard, producing a small wrapped package from his pocket. "What's this?" I asked. "Just open it." Inside was a vintage key on a simple silver chain. "It's the original key to our house," he explained. "The one from when your mother and I first bought it, before we had the locks changed. I found it cleaning out my workshop. Dad, I wanted you to have it, not for any practical reason." He cleared his throat. "More symbolic, I guess. The house is still your history, even if it's not your home anymore." The gesture touched me deeply. Coming from my father, a man who had always expressed himself through practical actions rather than emotional declarations, it represented a profound acknowledgement of both our past and our evolving relationship. "Thank you," I said, slipping the chain around my neck. "This means a lot." He nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the sentimentality of the moment. "Your party's a success. Good crowd. Good mix of people," I agreed, allowing the conversation to shift to safer ground. "That Thomas seems like a solid guy." I smiled. "He is." "Serious?" "Getting there." Dad nodded again. "Good. He'd better treat you right, though. I may be an old man now, but I still know how to set someone straight if needed. I laughed. I think we're safe. Thomas knows better than to cross a Wilson woman. Later, as guests began to depart, I found myself standing on my back patio with Mom, looking across at their house, the one I'd grown up in, with its familiar roofline and back porch where we'd spent countless summer evenings. It's strange, Mom said quietly. Looking at our house from this angle, I never realized how much the maple tree blocks the afternoon sun from the kitchen window. I noticed that when I first moved in. Different perspective changes how you see things. She smiled at the metaphor. Indeed it does. A comfortable silence fell between us. More companionable than I would have thought possible a year earlier. I was wrong, you know, she said finally. About so many things. The room situation, of course. But more than that, I was wrong about what you needed from us. From me. Mom, we've been through this. Let me finish, please. It's important. She gathered herself visibly. I favored Heather because she seemed to need more. Her needs were obvious, demanding attention. Yours were quieter, so I convinced myself you were fine on your own. It was easier that way. But being a mother isn't about doing what's easy. The admission surprised me. In all our recent reconciliation efforts, Mom had approached things obliquely, focusing on present relationship building rather than past mistakes. I missed so much, she continued. Your graduation honors. Your first big promotion. The house purchase. I should have been there, celebrating these milestones with you. You're here now, I said simply. Because you let me be. After everything, you opened the door again. She blinked back tears. I don't know that I would have been as generous. It wasn't just generosity, I admitted. Life's too short to hold on to anger forever. Dad's heart attack taught me that. She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. I'm proud of you, Rachel. Not because of your success or this beautiful home, though those things are wonderful. I'm proud of the person you've become, strong, compassionate, forgiving. I can't take credit for those qualities, but I can certainly admire them. The words washed over me like a healing balm. Not because I needed her approval anymore, I'd moved beyond that dependency, but because they represented a truth we could both finally acknowledge. As the party wound down, Thomas found me again, slipping his arm around my waist as we watched the last guests departing. So, he said casually, I've been thinking. Dangerous activity. He smiled. My lease is up next month. Is that so? This house has plenty of room for two. If the owner were interested in a housemate, the suggestion wasn't entirely unexpected. We'd been discussing the future, taking careful steps toward deeper commitment. Still, I considered it seriously before responding. The owner might be amenable to the right applicant. There would be terms and conditions, of course, naturally, and a trial period to ensure compatibility. Very sensible. I turned to face him. Are you sure? Living across from my parents isn't exactly what most men sign up for in a relationship. Thomas laughed. I like your parents. Your dad's been giving me grilling tips, and your mom slipped me her famous cookie recipe last week. As family baggage goes, you could do worse. Looking up at my house, the home I'd created entirely on my own terms, I felt a sense of completion. Not because everything was perfect or all wounds had healed, but because I'd built something meaningful from what had once been painful. The journey from the ultimatum to this moment had transformed me in ways I couldn't have predicted. Yes, I decided. Let's do it. Move in when your lease ends. Later that night, after all the guests had left and Thomas had gone home to his soon-to-be former apartment, I stood on my front porch, looking across at my parents' house. The porch light was still on, a warm glow in the darkness. Dad appeared briefly at the window, noticed me standing there, and raised his hand in a simple wave. I returned the gesture, then turned to go inside my own home. The house across from theirs wasn't a statement anymore. It wasn't revenge or vindication or even a fresh start. It was simply where I belonged, on my own terms, in my own right. The distance between our homes, once a chasm filled with hurt and resentment, had become just a street, easily crossed when we chose to connect. Life doesn't often give us perfect endings, just opportunities to write new beginnings. My journey from ultimatum to homeowner hadn't been about getting even, but about finding my own value. The house I'd bought in defiance had become a home built on acceptance of my past, my family's flaws, and most importantly, myself. As I turned out the porch light and closed my front door, I realized that the true revenge wasn't owning the house across from theirs. It was discovering that I no longer needed revenge at all. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about a time when something that started as a setback became the best thing that ever happened to you. Drop your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey from family drama to finding peace, please hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories about standing your ground and coming out stronger. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe in the power of building your own path, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the best response to being pushed out is to build something better. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember that your worth isn't defined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to rise above it.